Different headlines, but the same problems. Different industries, yet the same breakdowns. At a certain point, you have to ask, what's actually driving all of this? This is Beneath the Pattern, a podcast exploring the hidden patterns that drive the repeated problems shaping our culture. The tension we see in our politics, the burnout in our workplaces, the disconnection in our relationships, the mania in AI. They're all downstream of underlying patterns. And if we can start to see those patterns clearly, we don't just understand culture, we get the opportunity to shift it. I'm Scott Haber, and welcome to Beneath the Pattern. So the context for this episode is I attempted to record an episode on how to keep your heart open to a world in pain. And it so happened to coincide with the day the preschool and synagogue that I attended was attacked by an attempted shooter. While no kids or people besides the shooter were harmed, it really shook the core of my foundation, as I know it did so many people of where I'm from. And so what I recorded didn't feel quite right. It didn't feel like I really had allowed myself to bravely and courageously express myself. And that evening, I actually hosted a Zoom for a few people in my community just to grieve, share in difficulty, express what was coming up for us around the attack. And the ensuing podcast is a bit of a distillation of that Zoom. So some of the themes and topics you'll hear us cover or you'll hear me cover, is the evolutionary function of grief, how incomplete grief leads only to more grief, the mentalities, perspectives, and tribal nature that leads to in-grouping, and how both sides create and contribute to the dynamic. So it's a tender episode with lots to say in the wake of an attack on the preschool that I went to. And after this message, you can find it. I actually can't give my full truth. So I'm sure you might notice where that happens. You know, we do it all the time where someone's like, I really want you to come to this. Oh, by the way, you can say no. Hey, I'd love for you to do this, but no big deal if not. How much we're constantly bracing against our truth. Because vulnerability is fucking scary. Because the question is the world going to meet us and accept us in our vulnerability, or are we going to get rejected for it? One thing I've learned is partially the world will reject you for it. That's true. And the people that reject you for it will move away. And the people that accept you for it will come closer. So what you get is the world that orbits you and that's closer to you is the one that enjoys and reflects your authenticity. You know, I just hosted a Zoom call for some people in my community in the wake of this attack, and I was surprised by where the conversation went and how much we agreed upon some certain things. You know, one thing that I was realizing is sometimes when I'll feel the grief of synagogues getting attacked, imagining what it would be like if I had a child that came home, or imagining what my dad would say to me, I'll get this peculiar thought of, oh God, what might it be like to be quote unquote on the other side? What about the grief over there? And how complete can my grief be, or can my empathy be, if it's only for one side? What would happen if when we grieved our hurt, it was inclusive, it was empathetic, it was compassionate, and it served to unify rather than separate? What would happen if every time we grieved a loss in our community, it also opened us up to grieve a loss in the quote-unquote other community? So in this situation, Palestine or Gaza. It is hard to selectively choose or decide what you keep your heart open to. Because if you are selectively choosing what you keep your heart open to, it is incomplete. It comes with separation. It comes with fracturing. Tell me that the person who drove into the synagogue, who lost his family, kept his heart open to the other side of what kids or children, the terror they would feel in it happening. He did not. And so that's what it creates when we only grieve one side. When the way we feel hurt separates us and makes the other group the enemy, makes us in opposition to the other group. What it creates is more war. What it creates is more fighting. And so I see this and I feel it in myself too. The first thing that happens when an attack, and I'm talking about this through the lens of my identity and my culture, but please apply it to anywhere you feel you're part of a group, because the atomic structure of it is the same. The atomic structure of human emotions, human group dynamics, how we relate to ourselves is the same, and it does not so much matter as what clothes you're putting on. So I am just exploring it through the clothes I know and through the culture I was born into. But please, I hope you don't see this as a Jewish Palestine only thing. It's just my authentic experience to understand it along with other people. And so what I feel happen when an indignity happens to our group, is the first emotional movement or reaction is like this closed fist. And it's like, you see, we are going to stand together against hate. And it feels like this righteous sanctimony of, you see? And when I'm in that, it kind of feels good. There's, dare I say it, there's a little bit of a kink to it, where it's like, you see, it is us against the world. And we've got to stand together with our community. But you can't keep your heart open when you're doing that. You can't keep your heart open when you're pitted against the world. Because what you learn is that the world's against you, and you need to batter down the hatches on your identity. Is one of the people was sharing in the Zoom what it was like to go to camp and have IDF soldiers there. He's like, wow, that was great. And now I'm wondering as an adult, how do I interpret that? And I asked him, how do you interpret that? Then he was saying, well, we were learning about all the wars and how we had to stand up for ourselves, and we saw their rifles. And it just dawned on me, like, holy shit. That gave us the belief from really young age that we're going to be attacked, and that we have to constantly protect ourselves to survive. So survival meant vigilance and protection. And while that might be true, what does that do to a generation unconsciously? And one aspect, it really creates a generation that feels vigilant, but more so, they respond to the world anticipating attack, bracing against the world. If you feel like you're constantly expecting attack in your relationship, you will create it. Because either you're going to be looking for it and you're going to say, you see, and then you're going to trigger the other person into attacking you, or you're going to be so shut down and scared to the point where the other person might be like, yeah, what the fuck is going on? So separation begets more separation. We create it in the ways in which we were raised, and then internally we have unconsciously inhabited these beliefs, and then unbeknownst to us, unconsciously projected and passed them on to future generations. That's why I know how pokey it sounds, but the work always starts with our own healing. We're constantly contributing to the dynamic. Both sides are constantly contributing to the dynamic. It doesn't matter whether it's like a relationship, a venture capitalist and a co-founder who are trying to work together, or sides at war. Both sides are constantly contributing, participating, and creating the dynamic itself. And it's often unconscious. And the only way to work it is to make the unconscious conscious and to say, how am I contributing or participating to this dynamic? In what ways am I unconsciously validating it? And so there's this thing that happens when we batter down the hatches and we in-group more. You see, we're going to stand together. us against the world. And what does that create in the world? That it's us against the world, that it's Jewish people versus everybody. So it already creates the reality. The response feeds the belief, and the belief creates more of the response. Now, there's a beautiful story of there was a Chaldean country club. For people who don't know, Chaldeans are Iraqi Christians, and they heavily populate the town I'm from. And so it's like a really good mix of Jewish people, Chaldeans, and many other groups, but particularly Jewish people and Chaldeans. And growing up, I always felt quite literally the Chaldeans and I were at war because we were different. And we would sort of play that out in our behavioral dynamics and our group think. But across the street from the Jewish synagogue in preschool was a Chaldean country club. And what did they do? What did they do? They took in all the kids. They fed them. They welcomed them in like their own without thinking twice or asking. You cannot consider yourself, you cannot be in separation and do that. When your heart is open to the world, you cannot be separate. So I wonder what it would be like if that's what our response was like. Wow, this is painful. And I bet the other people feel a lot of pain too. And we might see things totally different. But what we share is feeling a shit ton of pain, a shit ton of fear, and a shit ton of insecurity. Real 3D physical insecurity. Because when you feel that and feel that shared sentience, it obliterates all divides. It goes beyond fundamentally identities that we wear as clothes to more of the backbone of our atomic structure, to our emotional reality. If you really want to cut past divide, meet people in the emotional reality, because there is where no identity can exist. And so I think of what is the evolutionary function of grief? What is the quote unquote hidden cost or the benefits of grief? Anytime I really grieve hard, I really grieve deeply, I'm put into contact with how impermanent everything in life is, how the only thing I'm guaranteed is that everything will go. And when I really touch that place without defending or trying to change it, the bottom of it is finding the one thing that never can change. And it sounds hokey, but it's something like love. For instance, I lost my best friend, and thankfully I continue to grieve him. Because while Zach has left the world, my relationship to Zach has not ended. And every time I grieve Zach, I am in connection with all the love I have for him. And so it's like the love itself never dies. But that can only be found in the grief. I was holding a client the other day. She was spinning around, I've got this venture capital presentation, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, oh, and by the way, I lost my friend. And I was like, whoa, slow down. It's so crazy to see what things will come out when people just let themselves talk, to see what's really there. And it was really challenging for her at first to admit the reality and to grieve it, because to grieve it meant that it was true and that it was final and she had to accept it. So much of the way we resist emotions is just trying to change and not accept reality as it is. And so when she got into grieving it, she said the most peculiar thing to me. She goes, holy shit, I didn't realize, but I was so scared that if I felt this, that it meant my relationship with her would be over and the love I had would be over. But when I feel it, it reminds me that I never can lose her, because I still feel all the care I have from her. I still feel in contact with all the care I have from her. That's the only reason we grieve in the first place, because we fucking care. Grief is love with no place to express. Grief is love with no place to express. And when you're in it, it does not have borders or separation or division. It comes to bring you closer to yourself, to your community, and really to all that is. Every time my relationship doesn't work, my partner and we grieve it, and it brings us so much closer, because it reminds us of the love we have for one another. in an undefended way without trying to fix it. And that love turns out to be the healing salve. But it doesn't come from fixing or making things wrong. It comes from letting it fall apart. On the Zoom call, I was talking to them, and one of the guys raised a really good point. He said, it was so interesting. I'm sure we all remember 9/11. And after 9/11 happened, we felt so together. And then we decided to go to war. And it was so interesting because it made me in that moment think, what has us so keen to push away the togetherness that the first second we feel it, it's time to go to war? On one hand, our response is, well, yeah, we have to respond to injustice. And if we didn't attack Iraq in the moment, we were putting up with terrorism. But what does it create is it creates more terrorism. It creates a generation of oppressed people that gives them reason toward terror. Terrorized people commit terrorism. That's nothing novel. So what if the function of difficulty and hardship is just to bring us closer together? Just to find, holy shit, when the synagogue got attacked, now I feel really close and unified with the people in my community. And wow, I didn't realize I had them all along. Or I didn't realize I could have leaned in and there was this much support. What would it be to just embolden that? The trick or the hack here, I said this in the last podcast, but is learning how to not need emergency to evolve and come together. So it's a phenomenon. You can read about it after any war or any hurricane. It's what we've been talking about. Communities come together and well-being goes up. Isn't that freaking crazy? And it's because people feel unified. But the hack is learning to trigger that point of unification without needing emergency or enmity. How does that happen? Internal unification. And how does internal unification happen? First off, what do I mean by internal unification? Learning to aggregate, learning to unite all the pieces and parts and wants and desires and conflicting parts of my character on fundamentally the same team. Doing the work to see they have always been bridged together. Their core motives have always wanted the same thing, to love and be loved, to see and be seen, to understand and be understood. And there's a way we can intellectually get that, but the real transformation or embodiment of it is beyond mind. It is neck down. And it comes from feeling the pain of all these disparate pieces. What do I mean by that? Any part of your psyche that feels leveraged against you, or that attacks you a little bit, or is self-flagellating, or doubts, or says you can't have that, or is skeptical, or wants to question what you do, all of those are born of pain, and we've taken them on as identity and characters. But really what they are just the stories we have identified with to resist the pain underneath. For instance, you might feel skeptical of yourself, but really underneath the skepticism was the one time that you asked somebody out or you made a pitch and you got rejected. And so your skeptical nature, or the skeptical part of you, was literally just born as a protective function, all to not feel the pain of getting rejected. Because some part of you learned it would be easier to be skeptical of yourself than to feel the pain, but at a huge cost. Because how fucking painful is it to always be in competition or leveraged against yourself, or competing with yourself, or doubting yourself? It is more painful to resist our pain than to welcome it. Because when you welcome it, it's like feeling the grief. It puts you in contact with something that feels like joy and love. So where this started was, how do we grow and do the work of coming closer together and in unification that isn't through emergency? And my answer was internal unification. And what I really mean is embracing difficulty. It happens in every frickin' moment of life. When someone lashes out at you, when you want to post something scary, when you're considering texting the person you really like, all of those places, there's just difficulty underneath. There's just sensation. And if you really take that to the bottom, you get to the truth of you, which is that you are not your pain. And you find in the metabolism of it, in the metabolization of it, You find yourself, because what you're creating, you're coming into contact with the part of you that can hold your pain, which means you're also coming into contact with the love that you are, with the love that can hold pain. And the more you do that, the more the composition of your psyche becomes that which can hold pain, or dare I say love. And the less you need difficult external situations to trigger development, the more the world is just able to move through you. And you don't need painful situations to feel your pain, because you already know how to stay open. What would the world look like if we were all doing that work earnestly and honestly? What would companies look like? My hypothesis would be companies would be actual family cultures. There is no unification in the world without unification in ourselves. There is no team cohesion in our company without internal cohesion within ourselves. There is no connection and intimacy in our relationship without connection and intimacy within ourselves. So I was on with a client today, and it just struck me of how often he had been late to our meetings. And I just said, hey, I'm really curious. You say you really want this work, but whenever it comes to it, you're always late. So what's going on? I notice whenever it becomes, I'm going to improvise a name, whenever it becomes time to advocate for Michael or to do what Michael wants, it seems like you're always a little late and taking a back seat. And so we were in it. And when we were in it, I go, how much, well, he asked me, so to what degree is it selfish to want what I want? And I laughed and I said, what we consider selfish is just when other people aren't doing what we want. You're so selfish that you didn't do the thing that I wanted you to do. And so I asked him, how much was that the way your mom responded to you when you were a kid? This is the owner of he's got a big lending company. And this is where the work is. And he goes, yeah, well, when I was a kid, when I wanted something and she didn't want it, she'd make me feel bad about it. And then I just watched it dawn across his eyes. And he goes, holy fuck, that's how I respond to my children. And they want something, but I don't think that's right for them. I make them feel bad about it. Because he learned that his wants couldn't be allowed without losing connection to the people that matter the most, right? Our parents have one job, to unconditionally love us. He was taught that his wants would be rejected. He would teach that to his kids. And then it shows up everywhere in his company, where he constantly is abandoning things he wants, making decisions that go against the grain of his desires, because really he's guarding for the criticism. The end of the pattern is first starting to spot it, but then to welcome the intensity that it hides underneath. So I meant it when I said it. Most of our attempts to solve things as a culture are really just to regulate intensity, so we can make the world feel a little bit more comfortable. And in the long run, we feel a shit ton more uncomfortable because of it. The intensity stores in our collective body, and it recycles and resurfaces, pop whack-a-mole, until it's ready to be held and felt and moved to see what the truth of it is. That's why my thesis, one of the working premises of this podcast, is a leading indicator for the healing of a culture is how much individuals can be in difficulty. It's a radical but simple premise. How we hold intensity as individuals changes what is possible as a collective. Because if we don't hold the intensity, we project it onto our kids, they repeat the pattern and pass it on. And now, every moment, our culture is offering us this, not even our culture, the situation of the global current that we live in is offering us an opportunity to hold more intensity without needing to solve it or fix it or project it onto other people. It is offering us a chance to heal. That's what intensity is. So how well can you learn to hold it? How much can you learn to be in it? Everyone's like, I want to feel alive. I want to feel bursting with life and jump off a bridge somewhere, whatever your thing is. You want to feel bursting with life, just welcome your emotions. There is so much aliveness down there. There is so much sensation and pure vigor in them. If you want to feel alive, welcome your intensity. Feel what it's like to not blame the other side and what might come up underneath. Feel what it's like to follow a want of yours that feels too scary to name or just to own it. Accept reality as it is and feel whatever you'd have to feel in that. Grieve it fully. Feel the heartbreak. Project is about. Really, all my work is about teaching people how to love more. And that love has to start with themselves. And when you decide to love more, you can't pick and choose which aspects are worthy of love. You can't say, well, this part is worthy of love and that part I want to change, or that part needs to be improved. Because what is the love in that? There isn't. When you decide to love more, it has to include it all. And when you do that for yourself, it eventually reflects to the whole.